Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 126 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm so thrilled you're here today, and I'm excited to talk with you about how to define your consulting advisory retainer. If you're like most consultants, you want to have a retainer as part of your service portfolio. You want to have that because it provides you with recurring revenue. It provides you with predictability. You have got a long-term, long-standing client that pays you a certain amount every single month, and it gives you a really good foundation from a client roster perspective, from a financial perspective, and also most of the time, these types of clients, consulting clients, are really fulfilling. It's so fun to be able to help someone with something that's typically more strategic in nature, to really collaborate and have, be someone, a CEO's thought partner or a CTO's thought partner or an SVP's thought partner, and really help them to achieve the types of goals that they're trying to achieve in their organizations by having you as an expert sounding board and advisor. So consulting retainers can be incredibly attractive as part of a well-balanced service portfolio for your consulting company. But oftentimes I find that consultants get stuck because these retainers feel challenging to sell. They can feel overwhelming to provide. We often get worried about is someone going to take advantage of the number of the advisory capacity that we have in our calendar? Are they going to call us too often? And just really afraid of moving forward with a consulting advisory type retainer because there's so many unknowns, so many moving parts, and it feels a little bit risky. Risky from the perspective, like I said, of you sign a client and then they are constantly calling you, which wasn't really what you were expecting or scoping, or they don't call you and you worry about whether or not you're providing enough value, or the third piece, which is what we worry about as humans, offering this and then getting rejected. It doesn't work. We offer a retainer and then are told no, and that feels bad. And so it can be so common to continue offering the same thing you've been offering because it feels more familiar. But again, if you're like most consultants, you want to have one of these retainers in your portfolio so that you are able to have the types of clients and work with them on the types of challenges you want to be working on, have that impact, and also have more of a predictable revenue stream going on in your business that supports other work, such as, project work or other things you're selling. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. Before we dive into the agenda, I thought I would share just a quick personal update. I spent all of last weekend, 3-day weekends in Grand Junction, Colorado, which is on the very western side of our state. Feels like Las Vegas or something. I think it was 105 degrees. Very hot. But I was there for my two older kids, 12 and 9, made it to the state meet. I think I told you about that last week. The state swim meet. My oldest has been swimming for 5 years. So this is sort of the culmination of his younger swimming career, ages 12 and under. And he was ranked in the top 10. I don't know the exact number, in the top 10 overall in the whole state out of thousands of swimmers his age. And he woke up Friday morning sick. And, he's a pretty happy-go-lucky kid. There were tears in his eyes. He's worked so hard for this and felt very dizzy. And so anyway, we decided to just take it step by step. And he went over to warm-ups and ended up swimming. Friday was not his best day, so it kind of impacted his overall results for the weekend. But He came back on Saturday and Sunday in the most amazing way and ended up finishing his races anywhere between kind of fourth and seventh place. So his best finish was the 400 IM, which is essentially two lengths of an Olympic size pool of every stroke: backstroke, freestyle, breaststroke, and butterfly. That thing is hard. That is a hard race. Takes about 5 to 6 minutes. Anyway, it was amazing just to see how he came back and that resilience and the lessons learned as part of it. And the middle guy, he's younger, so he's got more years in this particular age group, but he got a 16th place ribbon and was so proud of himself and the work he's done. He only started swimming again competitively in a year ago. So, anyway, that's the update. There's so many lessons to be taken away from those types of sports. And you may be playing sports yourself or have kids in sports or have a history in the past of playing sports, like in high school or college. And just thinking back for you, those lessons learned about training and training and training, preparing and preparing, and then having some kind of a setback, and then not letting it impact you and your overall business, but letting it, you know, taking a moment, regrouping, and figuring out a different way to get the result that you want. So many parallels to running a consulting business and selling consulting services that I think we could take away from sports. So I've been thinking about a lot of those parallels through the weekend as I was sitting there in the natatorium for hours at a time. So anyway, that is what has happened. My swim season is now over until September. So I'm excited for that fall season to start. All right. Well, with that, let's dive into how to define your consulting advisory retainer. So, the agenda for today is going to be number one, we'll just level set for a moment on what is a retainer. What am I talking about today? A lot of times that word retainer is thrown around in many different contexts. So, I want to make sure we're just on the same page about what we're talking about today specifically. I'll give you a few examples to make sure we're on the same page. Then I'm going to share with you a 3-part framework that I've created for you to help you design your retainer offer. And then we'll wrap it up. I'll share with you how to pull everything that we work on in today's episode together so that you've got a path to a compelling retainer offering. So that is our focus. Before we dive into item number one, I want to share with you the companion resources for today's episode. There are 2 of them. The first is a independent consulting retainer readiness assessment that I've created for you. I think it's 17 or so questions that you'll go through and answer. And then it will give you a very detailed report on where are you ready to offer retainers in your business or to improve retainers if you're already offering them. And then what are the 2 to 3 priorities or next steps for you to be fully ready to offer retainers if you're not offering them yet, or retainers at the next level if you are already offering retainers. So it's a really powerful, quick assessment and gives you a detailed action plan to put in place. So you can go take that at the URL icretainer.com. So the 2 letters IC for independent consultants, obviously, retainer.com, icretainer.com. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. And then the second companion resource is go back and listen to episode 111, which is about consulting advisory retainers overall. So this is a deeper dive. Listen to this one first, and then you can go back and listen to that one as well. It gives you more meat around consulting advisory retainers. And then today we're talking very specifically about designing the offer itself. All right. So those are the 2 companion resources. Now let's dive into agenda item number 1, which is let's just level set on what are we talking about today in terms of advisory retainers. Very simply put, a retainer is an agreement between you, the consultant, and your client to provide a specific set of services over a defined period of time for a recurring fee. It's a pretty high level description. And we'll talk about, I think the devil in the details here is about what are the specific set of services. They are not deliverables. They are not action items. They are the specific set of services in this case is access to you. So let me give you a couple of real life examples here, very specific in terms of what is provided. I'm not sharing with you any client data, but this gives you a sense of what you could be offering as it relates to advisory retainers. So the first one I'll call a pure access type of a retainer. And this is what it looks like. The client can call or text you anytime. You have a response time of 1 business day. Again, this is an example, so you don't have to copy this at all, but it gives you an example and some things to think about. So pure access, there it's an advisory retainer where there are no proactive anything, it's all responsive. So the client can call or text you anytime. You have a response time of 1 business day, unless it's time sensitive. It might be a couple of hours for time sensitive type requests or questions or things that the client wants to talk with you about. You have ad hoc meetings in this type of a scenario. Maybe once or twice a year, you might go meet with the client in person, but it's ad hoc, it's not structured. And then in this case, you're serving as a sounding board. You're helping that client to find their blind spots. You're strategizing with them as a thought partner and expert. And an example of pricing for that might be $8,500 per month. So that's an example for you of pure access type retainer, advisory retainer. And then on the more structured side, an example of a more structured advisory retainer could look like you're providing more of a quarterly type of a facilitation. So you might be doing quarterly planning and strategy. You might be doing yearly planning and strategy and then quarterly planning and strategy, helping them to facilitate exactly, what it is they're working on, why they're working on it, what the cadence and priorities are, and helping them to build out a plan and really refocus on the big picture. And then from there, you might be offering things like, such as a once a month call, like structured calls or biweekly structured calls, in addition to them having access to you to text you or call you at any time with some kind of response rate. I'll get back to you within a day, something like that. So that's a more structured example for you of an advisory retainer. And again, you're not providing any deliverables in this case. You're not writing out a roadmap. You're not writing their strategy. You're facilitating all of that. And then you're really in lockstep with that client about what it is they're working on, what they're not working on, why they're doing, what they're doing, and have that context so that when you're working with them in an advisory capacity, you've got all of that background knowledge about them and their business and their goals and their worries and challenges. And so an example of pricing for that type of structure might be something like 12K per month, blended out over a 6 month or 12-month period. When I'm giving you this monthly pricing, I would strongly suggest having minimum period of time, 6 months or 12 months, something like that. So I'll do another episode here in a while about pricing specifically for retainers, but that gives you some idea to start with. So now that we have a level set on what it is we're talking about, you've got some specific examples. So you have got those in your mind. Now let's dive into designing your retainer. And I like to think about it in 3 parts. So I'm going to give you this 3-part framework for you to be thinking about. And then I'll dive into each piece of it. So I'm going to walk through the framework and then we'll dive into each of the 3 pieces in a lot more detail. So the first piece of this 3-part framework to design your retainer is really understanding for your ideal type of a client. So it could be a role. I work with CHROs or I work with CTOs in a specific industry, for example. What are their business problems that they need support or would want support or could very benefit from having expertise such as yours? What are the business problems and getting really clear on that? We'll dive into that in a lot more detail. But that's the first part of this 3-part framework. The second is, what is the ultimate value to them of having an advisory retainer with you? And then the third part of designing your retainer is your own business requirements. A lot of times we forget that piece of it. We think about, okay, what is my value proposition to the client? Why would they want to work with me? What are the outcomes for them? And then we forget about our side and what our requirements are, and then end up working with clients who aren't as ideal. So we always want to give equal weight to what it is that you want in your business. Those are the three parts. Now let's dive into each one of them very specifically. So let's start with the business problem itself. Why would an ideal client, consulting client, want or need a retainer? What is the business problem? Now, there are times where there is no specific business problem. It's just generally speaking, a CEO who knows that having a relationship such as an advisory retainer is really valuable. And those are really great clients to have because you're supporting them through a myriad of different challenges and ups and downs and that kind of thing. What can be an easier starting point, though, for you is to really hone in on specific business problems, especially as you're getting your advisory retainers up and running. So it isn't you trying to sell just generally, I'll be your advisor. It can be narrowed down more specifically so that you know who you're targeting and what kind of inflection points in their business you would be most effective in helping them so that it's easier for you to articulate the value proposition. It's easier for you to find potential clients who need your support. So let me give you some examples of this. The business problem. Why would your ideal client want or need a retainer with you or with an advisor like you? So, some examples here to bring this to life and give you some food for thought about and applying this to your business. So, the first example would be there's a CEO of a mid-sized company who's reorganizing, who knows that they've got to reorganize. Maybe they're changing up some of their own product or service offerings, and they don't have an HR department. They might have an HR kind of generalist or someone who does a lot more of the execution, but they don't have a strong thought partner when it comes to HR and someone who's got experience, such as yours, if you're in this space, of what it looks like to effectively and successfully reorg and all of the tentacles and things to be thinking about that are way beyond just changing the boxes and the titles on an org chart. So that would be an example of thinking about, okay, the CEO of a mid-sized company who doesn't have a CHRO or even a VP of HR, they just have the bare bones of an HR department and the type of advisory scenarios that would benefit them. Another example of a business problem that would lead your ideal client to want or need a retainer. Think about the scenario where you've got a private equity backed company that just installed a new CEO and they want to make sure that that new CEO is successful. He may not have a strong team under him right now. And so having you as an advisor can fill in the gaps of missing executive team from a thought partnership perspective, not that you're doing the work, and help that CEO to build out and replace people and build out the team that will be in place in the longer term. So the inflection point there for that type of a scenario is the private equity firm is coming in and installing new CEOs and having you as kind of their advisor who works with their CEOs or their portfolio companies can be really valuable. Another example is the scenario where a CTO, let's call it a later stage type of a startup, wants an external sounding board so they can strategize on navigating potential deals with either strategic buyers or another round of funding, and having someone such as yourself as a consultant to be able to talk to who's external, who doesn't have any skin in the game other than that client's success, and is able to really go through a lot of what if type scenarios and helping that CTO think ahead of the curve. Another example to get your juices flowing, think about an SVP of a larger company. So we've been talking about some mid-size and smaller company scenarios. Think about a large company and an SVP is promoted, has a much bigger portfolio, is now managing people in multiple layers of depth in their organization, when in fact, maybe in the past, maybe they've only had a couple layers of depth. So they're trying to managing people through people and have a lot of peers that they've got to navigate those politics with, a new set of responsibilities and expectations, and having you as a sounding board, as someone who's either done that before in an organization, had that level of responsibility, or you've been a consultant to people who have had that responsibility and you understand what the challenges are and what they might be missing or how they might be thinking about things from their old vantage point as a director and now need to be thinking about things as an SVP or EVP even to be successful in their role. So that is another example of a larger size company where someone just got promoted and having you as an advisor can be really valuable to them and the success and their ability to be more effective more quickly in their new role. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought about different scenarios of where an advisory retainer could be really valuable to an ideal client and those types of business problems and inflection points in your ideal clients' careers, in your ideal clients' challenges or goals that they're trying to implement in their own businesses or business units, and help you to start thinking about where might it make sense for me to start offering retainers against which types of business problems. So, to put this into practice for your own business, I will share with you an exercise that I give to my own clients. It's a piece of an exercise that I give to my own clients, my own independent consulting business clients as they're implementing retainers in their businesses and help you to start putting this work into practice. So, the glimpse of that exercise here is thinking about the business problem. Why would your ideal client want or need a retainer? Get a piece of paper and put it into two columns. On the left-hand side, just start brainstorming. What are all the different types of situations and problems that your ideal clients will need or want support navigating? So, what are those inflection points? What are those scenarios or situations that come up? What are the problems that they're facing that both personally and professionally? So, like the promotion example I gave you, or brand new to their job example that I gave you. What are the different types of scenarios, situations, problems, challenges, goals that they're trying to navigate that where you have the expertise or could have the expertise to support them? That's on the left-hand side of this two-column exercise. And then on the right-hand side, so just write down all of it, anything that comes to you. One of the biggest blockers that I see, though, as we implement this exercise is imposter syndrome coming up, right? Well, I don't know enough to do that or to be that advisor for them. I don't know enough to help them to support that scenario. I so and so is would be better at that than I am, someone you know. That's okay. What you're going to do is put all those things on the right-hand side. So, what we're doing here is listing out all of the business problems that your ideal clients have or could have, and where an advisor would be really valuable for them from a sounding board perspective, from an expertise perspective, from a been there, done that before, or seen that before perspective. That's what you're putting on the left-hand side. And you're not letting your brain edit itself by thinking, I can't do that, or I'm not good enough at that, or I don't know enough to do that. Do not allow the editing to happen on the left-hand side of your paper. On the right-hand side of your paper, write down all of those doubts that you've got, all of that imposter syndrome type thinking. Put that over on the right-hand side. What do you think about your ability to be able to provide this? And where is your brain arguing with you that you don't know enough, or other people know more, or you wouldn't be successful in supporting them? And the purpose of this exercise that I'm giving you is twofold. Number one, you're allowing yourself to write out get really some stronger thinking about what it is that you could offer and when you would offer it and what kinds of business challenges you would be helping your ideal client to solve without blocking yourself with, I'm not good enough at it. And then on the right hand side, keeping track of all of that internal debate that you've got going on about, are you capable of delivering this type of advisory service? And the imposter syndrome, is really important from an awareness perspective. We can't just sweep this under the rug and expect to be successful. We've got to really be able to identify that imposter syndrome type thinking and then be able to tackle it head on. So that is the exercise that I'll give you to help you start to uncover and really identify the types of business problems that you can help your clients solve from an advisory retainer perspective. Okay, let's move on now to the second part of the three-part framework, which is the business value. What's the impact of the retainer for your ideal client? The impact isn't help them navigate with a strategic buyer. The impact isn't, in the example I gave you a minute ago, the impact is not, help them be more successful now that they've been promoted. Those are not the impacts. The impact isn't help them to reorg if that's what they're doing. Those are not the impacts. The impacts are the ultimate impact to them accomplishing their business goal. You helping them to increase the likelihood and the magnitude of accomplishing their business goals. So, for example, it might mean that in that example I was giving you a minute ago with the strategic buyer scenario, that the deal goes through for a higher valuation, and it might go through faster. Even 2 weeks faster on one of those types of deals is incredibly impactful. A month faster is incredibly impactful because, as they say, time kills all deals. It might mean that with the support of your advisory, the ultimate impact is that a board initiative that your consulting client is working toward, they end up hitting the target on time versus only getting 80% of the target and it's late, something like that. Those are some examples. You want to be thinking in a much more tangible way. And I'll give you an exercise here in a minute to do that. A much more tangible way about what the ultimate business impact or value is of having you as a retainer. Because no one wants to have you as a retainer just to have you as a retainer. No one wants to have any of us as a retainer just to have us as a retainer. They have a reason, an ultimate value that they're trying to accomplish. And they want to accomplish through your support. Another example of business value could be avoiding costly business mistakes. So in that example where I was sharing there's no CHRO and the CEO is reorganizing, there could be some really costly mistakes in terms of retention of high value employees, of productivity, of reputation of that new CEO and ability to lead if a project like this doesn't go successfully. So having you on board as an advisory retainer type of a resource can be that catch net, that safety net to help your end clients avoid costly business mistakes. Another example of business value of your advisory retainer is helping them to avoid costly personal mistakes that damage their reputation and end up leading to them getting fired or pushed out or more of a lame duck where they have less influence. Having you as a safe external sounding board that doesn't really have any skin in the game other than your end client success can be incredibly valuable. An example here, when you think back to that SVP example I gave you where they just got promoted, helping them go through what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? What about this peer? What about this new colleague? What are you doing to manage managers of managers? How are you thinking about this? What they might not even realize they need to be thinking about is incredibly valuable and helps them to get more productive, more influential, more effective more quickly. And so that's where you want to be thinking about and ultimately quantifying those ultimate business values of hitting targets more quickly, saving costly mistakes and rework, really getting yourself to the place where you're able to quantify the value of the impact of your retainer. So the exercise that I'll give you here, again, a little glimpse into the work that I do with my own consulting business owner clients that I coach. We work on quantifying the value of the work that they're doing. So to do that, what you do, a piece of that is identifying and then quantifying the tangible and intangible impacts of the retainer that you're going to be offering. So now that you know what the business problems are that you would be helping them to solve, then you can go back through and think about, okay, what is the tangible impact of solving this problem? When we solve this problem, we get this outcome, and then this is the value of getting that outcome. So for tangible type things, it can be easier to quantify. They might be saving some amount of money, they might be increasing revenue by some amount. And then also the intangible side, get creative about how you might, in your own mind, justify some type of a value. And they're feeling more peace of mind, they're more effective, more calm, more well rounded as a human, going home and being able to be present with their family makes them more impactful at work and less stress. Like, how might you quantify that? And get yourself to the place where you've quantified the value of the retainer that you're offering, that you're designing. And then the last piece of this is your own business requirements. I love to do this before I've got any kind of retainer client in the pipeline. Then it becomes easier to compromise and justify. So just sit down and think about this agnostically of, without respect to any type of clients or any specific client, I should say, what are your own business requirements? We know that you can make anything work. You're very industrious. I think that's the word. I know that you can figure out how to make things work. That's what you're likely very good at as a consultant, being very flexible and being able to pivot whatever is thrown your way. But let's just sit down and think about it for you. What are your business requirements as it relates to a retainer? What kind of support do you want to provide? Do you want to work with clients who need a 2-hour turnaround when they're having an emergency and then they have a lot of emergencies in their own minds? Or do you want to provide support to clients who don't have emergencies, who aren't kind of more in the fire, at least from a mental perspective, right? A lot of the types of clients that you might be working with are very senior. Some of them handle that very well and others don't. And so, really, just thinking about what is it that you want in terms of your own business and your own business model, and being really clear and writing all that down. The other question that I love asking and answering is, how would a retainer client earn a spot on your roster? What are the qualities? What are the types of problems that you love solving? What do the financials need to look like? A lot of times we think about our business as a bird in the hand. I better take it. I don't want to leave money on the table. I'll make this work. Those types of things versus thinking about it from the opposite perspective, which is you have a finite amount of capacity, especially if you're not leveraging any subs, you're working on your own. You have a finite amount of capacity. How would a retainer client earn a spot on your roster? This is the opposite of you kind of feeling desperate or flexible to sign any type of clients. This is you thinking about yourself as someone who is scarce, someone who is sought after, someone who is valuable in what you do. And how does a client earn a spot on your roster? This is I'm a little bit down into a tangent. It could be a whole own episode, but thinking about your business from that perspective of someone who's sought after and needed and expert at what you do is a very different way to run your business than, let me figure out how I can keep things moving, keep things running, keep a flow of cash coming in. Very different way of thinking about your business. So apply that here in terms of your own business requirements as it relates to consulting advisory retainers and an offer for consulting advisory retainer, and think about, without respect to any specific scenario, what is it that you want so that you can create your offer with all of that in mind. So let's wrap up today's episode by pulling all of this together to define your consulting advisory retainer by creating a value proposition that addresses the business problem, that tackles and articulates the value and the outcome that they'll realize through working with you in a retainer, why they would want that, and the results that they would be getting. So pulling all of this together into a value proposition So that's where those three things come into play. And then from there, you're going to build out your qualification criteria. So taking your own business requirements, how do you want to qualify these clients and decide if you're even going to offer them a retainer, or maybe you're going to offer them some other type of project-based work? And then ultimately you'll decide the features. What am I offering here? Is it text me anytime, 24/7, or during the business week? Email me anytime. We're going to meet. We're not going to meet. It's going to be structured. It's not going to be structured. Like, what are the features of what it is that you're offering? And then ultimately what you want the pricing to look like. And again, there's a whole nother level of figuring out the pricing, but I've given you the starting point of that with helping you to really quantify the value of what the outcomes are that your retainer will help your client realize. So that is the way to pull all of this together. You're going to want to take the raw materials that you've identified by brainstorming the problem, the value, and your own business requirements, and then take that information and build out your value proposition, your qualification criteria, your features, and then ultimately your pricing. All right. So as we are finishing up today, I just want to remind you to go take that consulting retainer readiness assessment at icretainer.com. And then also go back and listen to episode 111 about consulting advisory retainers. And I would love to hear from you. Send me an email and let me know. I'm at melissa@melissalieberman.com. I would love to hear about your journey to retainers and anywhere you're getting stuck. And may include it in a future episode. All right. Great to talk with you. And I will see you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.